Hi young oceanographers, Audrey here, and this is the coral reef video. Today we are going to learn about coral reef and where coral reefs are located. We will discover which animals and plants live in coral reefs and why they are so important to our human needs. We will also create our own coral with clay. This is what our coral reef will look like. Okay, now that we know what project we're doing, let's take a look at the materials in your project bag. Here is our project bag with our materials. Let's take out the project card first so you know what the materials we are using will be. So as you can see, we have our fun facts, our directions, and our materials right here. So today you will need Sculpey clay in 4 colors. Each package will look like this. You will need a toothpick, some aluminum foil, and a plastic mat. This will be in your red bag. On the other side, we have some learning objectives for the project and critical thinking questions to ask with a parent or friend. This side will be mostly for the parents to look at after the project. Okay, now that we know the materials that are in the project bag, let's get started with our lesson. Okay, before we start, let's learn some important things about coral and coral reefs. Coral reefs are living, growing, changing structures found in warm, shallow waters. Coral is made of tiny creatures called polyps. Polyps are small animals related to jellyfish that attach to rocks, then multiply and group together to form coral. Corals have tiny tentacle-like arms that they use to capture their food in the water and sweep into their mouths. Corals live in symbiotic association with algae. The algae provide food to the coral, produced by photosynthesis, and the coral provides shelter, protection, and nutrient-rich environments for algae to grow. That's what makes it symbiotic. Coral reef ecosystems are also very important to plants and animals that live in them, as well as to our own human needs. 25% of all ocean animals rely on coral to survive, and coral relies on them as well. Fish, algae, jellyfish, lobsters, rays, clams, seahorses, and sea turtles are only a few of the thousands of creatures that rely on the reefs for their survival. While coral reefs only cover about 1/4 of the gigantic ocean floor, they create half of Earth's oxygen and absorb nearly 1/3 of the carbon dioxide generated from burning fossil fuels. Reefs are in the coastal biome of the ocean, which is near the shore of the coastline. Reefs also provide nursery grounds for fish populations to grow and protect the shore and coastal communities from storm surges and erosion from waves. Coral reefs are also the Earth's medicine cabinet, meaning that medicines have been derived from these living coral reef organisms, including antiviral drugs and the life-saving anti-cancer agent. The largest reef in the world is the Great Barrier Reef, located off the Australian coast. It is made of over 2,900 individual reefs. The Great Barrier Reef can be seen from outer space and is the world's biggest single structure made from living organisms. Sadly, the existence of coral reefs all around the world is threatened by climate change, overfishing, and pollution. Scientists are looking for all kinds of ways to protect and maybe even revive corals. One option is to create more marine protected areas, like national parks in the ocean. Scientists say that creating marine refuges where fishing and mining are off limits make the reefs healthier and more resilient. All right, now that we've learned a little bit about coral, let's get started making our coral reef. We will be using Sculpey clay today to make our coral reef. Once it's completed, you will need to ask an adult to bake it in the oven for you. There are directions in your project card. We will use our foil as an armature, which is a framework for the clay that we place around. So in order to make this, we will be kind of smushing it into our hands, using our palm to create a somewhat flat surface. And to make it really flat, just finish by pressing it against your mat to get that nice flat side. There we go. Now that we've got our armature, we're going to start off making our rock upon which all our coral will be set. So in order to do this, I'm just pressing the gray clay between my palms like so. And to finish it off, to just spread it out a little more, I am pressing it into my mat just to get a little more surface area out of it. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat, it is a rock. You'll really want that texture, actually. And you don't have to worry about your foil base being perfect either, because you'll want your rock to look a little misshapen and natural. So as you can see, I am tucking the gray clay under the edges of the foil. So any little spots of foil, I'm just pressing down and covering up and pushing in, and we have our rock. So first we're going to start off with our trumpet coral. If you look at our example here, it's this green one right here. It's also called candy cane coral, and it's a tube with puffy, wavy looking flowers at the end. They are very durable and can survive in very harsh conditions. So to make this, we're going to start off by taking a bit of our green clay. You don't need too much, just about the top of your thumb. We're going to be melting that a little bit between our fingers and rolling it between our palms. About this wide here, so like half of a pinky. And we're going to just roll it out. It doesn't have to be perfectly even throughout, but get it as close as possible to that half pinky width. Okay, now that we've got our noodle of clay, we will be taking off pieces about ½ an inch long. So we're just going to bunch these, and we want about 5 of these. So now I've got 3. Let's keep pinching them off. 4 and 5. So now that we've got this, we're going to pinch the base together like so. So you see how this bottom bit's kind of smushed in, and we're going to separate out the tops so it looks like this. Now we're going to start making it looking a little more trumpety. To do this, I will be pinching the tops with my thumb and pointer finger. Just from the very top of the coral, you can use your thumb to support it. And see how I have that flat head? And if your sides get a little smushed, you can pinch them back in, like so. And now we have our first trumpet. Let's keep moving on. And I think I'll place them right about here. In order to place your coral on the rock, you just kind of have to squeeze it in at the base. See how I'm pressing the sides of the clay into our rock all the way around until it's fairly secure. You don't want this falling off. And to finish getting that trumpet shape, I will be taking my little toothpick and going in the center and rotating it until we get a nice round circle. And there we go, our trumpet coral. Now we're going to be moving on to our pillar coral. And this is fun because we'll actually be mixing some colors. We'll be mixing a little bit of our yellow Sculpey and a little bit of our pink. Now, when you're starting off, you don't want too much pink. So start off with just about the tip of your pinky, while with the yellow you want about the tip of your thumb. So about this much per. So while we're mixing, we're going to be piecing it apart, pulling it like this, and smushing it back in. And we're going to repeat this process until the colors start to blend into each other. And while this is going on, I'm going to give you a few facts about the pillar coral. So the pillar coral look like tall pillars, and they resemble fingers. They can grow up to 10 feet tall, and they are the only coral of this type. Ooh, look at that. So if you can see this right now, and you look up from your own clay and see how the orange is coming through now that the pink is melting into the yellow. If you feel like your orange is a little too yellow, just add a pinch of pink and do the same with your yellow if you're feeling like it's a little too pink. I think this ratio is just about right for the type of orange that I want for the pillar coral, so I'm gonna start mushing it in a little bit more with the palms of my hands, checking for any discoloration, any spots of yellow or pink. There's a little bit here, so I'm gonna roll it in one more time, pull apart, smush back together, pull apart, and smush back together. Now, in order to make our pillar coral, we'll be starting off with a kind of sculpey noodle, similar to what we did for our trumpet coral. The key is for this, we don't want to make it too thin, otherwise it won't be able to support itself. So we're gonna, in the palm of our hands, we're gonna roll our little sculpey ball, like so, and we're gonna lay it on our mats and roll it out. In this case, we want it to be about the thickness of our pinky. If it's much smaller than that, it'll have a hard time supporting itself. If it's taller, which it'll need to be to better represent the pillar coral height. Ooh, that's too thin. And if it's too thin, just fold it back together like so and start rolling out. And if it seems to not stay any thicker, you can also just re-roll your ball like so and go back to your mat and roll again, keeping an eye on that width. Okay, this is about the thickness we want. So in this case, we're going to be taking off about an inch worth of Sculpey clay and simply placing them right by our trumpet coral from earlier. You can also round out the tips before you place them or after you place them just by lightly pressing your fingers on the sides of the top of the pillar coral. We're going to get one more here and one more here. And if you make these a bit thicker, you can add a couple more, you can add a little bit more length. And if you make these too thin, then it'll just be best if you keep your pillar coral short so it can support itself and stand tall like this. And there we go, our pillar coral. So now we're going to move on to our brain coral. These are spherical shapes with wavy indents that look like a brain. Brain coral can also live up to 900 years. So I'm going to move this our green clay out of the way. And we're going to take quite a bit of yellow clay to make our brain coral, about a thumb's worth. So I'm just warming this up in my hands. And what we want to do with this is kind of make a teardrop shape. To do this, we're going to pinch out about this much clay, just between your thumb and pointer finger, and roll it into a little ball, like so. And then to make a teardrop shape, we're going to place it on our mat and only roll 1/2 of the ball, like so. And that is our first brain coral. And in order to give it the wavy indent shape, we're going to be taking our toothpick and poking in little dots. There we go. Now we're just going to repeat the process about 3 more times. Now that we have our brain coral, we will be moving on to our sponge coral, which is our pink coral here and our indigo coral here. So sponge coral have a spongy tube shape. The shapes of their bodies allow for maximum water flow through the central cavity, where the water deposits nutrients and then leaves through a hole called the osculum. So let's start off with our pink sponge coral. I'm going to be taking off just a pinch for now, maybe 2 pinches. 2 pinches of my pink Sculpey and rolling it up between my palms. So once we've got our nice round Sculpey ball, we're going to be pulling out, we're going to be splitting it into about 2, and then we're going to roll these. So we're just going to start off by making our first of the pink sponge coral. And once we have our ball shape, like so, we're going to flatten 2 sides of it like this, and then roll it out on those 2 sides. And then once we have it kind of like a noodle, a fairly thick noodle, we're going to press both sides with our fingers to get a nice cylinder shape. And you'll want the cylinder, once it's rolled out, to be about the length of 2 of your fingers. And then just flatten the top and bottom like so. And let's see, why don't we place it on this side of our brain coral? So we're going to do what we've been doing with all our other coral by pushing in the sides of it into the rock. There we go, fairly secure. And in order to make the osculum, we will be putting in our toothpick, not terribly deep, just about this deep, and swirling it around like we did with our trumpet coral until we get the shape fairly wide. And then if you want to, you can press the top of the coral with your finger. And there you have it. Now that we have our pink sponge coral, let's move on to our indigo sponge coral. So taking a wedge of Sculpey clay, a little bit larger than your thumb, we're going to be rolling this into a ball between our palms, like so. Let's make it a little rounder. And then we're going to roll it against our mat. And we want this fairly thick. So we're going to want to roll it out until it's a little bit past our pinky. So it'll end up being about 5 fingers long. You can move your hand back and forth as you roll to make sure that the clay noodle is fairly even. All right, let's stop about there. We're going to want to cut this into thirds. And with each of these, we're going to slightly smush them down like this. Hold one side of it with our thumb and pointer fingers and twist it until it looks like a unicorn horn. Okay, now that we've got this nice twisted shape, we're going to flatten out the top with our finger like this and place it next to our pink sponge coral. Now to make the osculum, we're going to be making a very shallow hole with our toothpick at the very top, like so. Now we're going to repeat the process. Okay, last but not least, we're going to be moving on to our red star coral right here. Red star coral is a colonial coral species that is usually found in massive boulders and domes, but it can also grow as an encrusting form. Colonies can be 10 to 250 centimeters in diameter and can appear with red, green, and brown coloration. Today we'll be doing red. So in order to do this, I'm taking off a pinch of red, like so, and we're going to be rolling this out on our mat. This is going to be a very similar process to the trumpet coral we made earlier, but in this case we'll be making our red coral slightly thicker. Okay, that looks nice. You're going to want it to be about as long as your two hands together. Okay, now we're going to be dividing this into 7 pieces. Each piece is going to be about the length of your pointer finger's nail. So let's cut each piece like so. You've got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so now we're going to very delicately flatten one side of each of our 7 pieces, like so, just with our pointer finger, and setting it aside for now as we repeat the process with each one. To do this, I would recommend holding the piece between your thumb and index finger, and then with your other hand just lightly pressing the top until it's flat. Now we're going to place these in a circular formation with one in the center and the rest of our pieces surrounding it. And you'll be placing these next to each other so they're just touching. You're not going to be smooshing them in too heavily. Just like this, so it looks kind of like a flower. And now with the bottoms, we're going to pinch these together and then lightly push the tops together as well. Just enough so that they still maintain their own shape while also staying right next to each other. Now let's place this right by our brain coral here. We're going to be smooshing it in, and you can also press the top a little as well, which will help make your star coral a little shorter while also maintaining that shape. Now to finish off, we'll be adding small holes by just pricking the center of each tube with our toothpick. And now we have all our coral. To finish this off, we'll be adding some texture to our rock with our toothpick. So as you can see, I have started making little holes. So we're just going to be poking our toothpick in and out of the clay that forms our rock to add the texture that you see here. Tapping with your finger so that any little bits of rock sculpey that are poking out are back in and flattened. And there we go. We finished our coral reef. Remember, you will need to ask an adult to bake your Sculpey clay project in the oven. The directions for this are on your project card. Nice job! Thanks for joining me today on the Coral Reef Project. Remember that today we learned that coral is a living organism and that there are different types of coral. We identified where coral reefs are located. We discovered the plants and animals that live in coral reefs. We learned why coral reefs are important to human needs. And we created our own coral reef with clay. That's it for this project. Awesome job. See you next time.